Man was taught that there was a supreme being, infinite and all-powerful, that it was the Creator who created all things above and below, that man was created by this almighty being, and having been created by him, he was his son, that this almighty was man's heavenly father. Second, when man was created, the Creator placed within the body of man a spirit or soul which never died but continued on throughout eternity. Third, when man was created, it was ordained that his material body should return to the earth from which it was taken. When this material body died, it released the soul which went into the world beyond, there to wait until it was so called upon to occupy another material body. Apparently, as soon as his primitive mind could grasp the facts, he was taught that this soul was given a task. This task was for the soul to rule the material body by overcoming material desires. When this was accomplished, his soul would be called back into the great source, and forever afterwards live in perfect joy and happiness. He was taught that one material life was so short that the soul could never overcome all of the material desires. So it was ordained that his soul should come into many bodies until the task was accomplished, that these reincarnations were the salvation of his soul. Fourth, it was thoroughly instilled into his mind that the Heavenly Father was the great love, and that this great love ruled the universe and never died. He was taught that the love of the Heavenly Father was far greater than the love of his earthly father, who was only a reflection of his Heavenly Father. Therefore, he should always approach his Heavenly Father without fear or dread, and in perfect confidence in love, knowing that loving hands were being held out to receive him from when he came. Fifth, he was taught that all mankind were created by the same Heavenly Father, and therefore all mankind were his brothers and sisters, and should be treated as such in all his dealings with them. Sixth, finally he was taught his duties on earth, how he should live to prepare himself to become fit to pass into the world beyond when he was called. He was especially reminded that he must follow the paths of truth, love, charity, chastity, with perfect love and confidence in his Heavenly Father. From this short and inadequate sketch, it is shown that the fundamental principles of the first religion of man were the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. Judging from the various religious teachings of the sacred inspired writings, the phrase brotherhood of man is not meant to convey the idea that all men are to look upon each other as blood brothers. It would seem to me that this phrasing is symbolical or used as an example for explanation. I think our modern example better explains the meaning of the mind of present man, namely, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This seems to be confirmed by the 42 questions in the Osiris ritual. If we all follow this golden rule, no discord could arise among mankind, and the world would be in virtual bond of brotherhood. Again, I think the meaning of the word charity is not fully comprehended today. It refers to the soul rather than the material part of man. Not only material charitable actions, such as feeding the hungry and clothing the naked, but it includes good and charitable thoughts of others. We should never think ill of anybody, but try to help them overcome their failings. The great Master Jesus gave an example of this. When Thoth of Atlantis founded the colony on the Nile Delta, Egypt's history began. Thoth built the first temple at Sais, and there taught religion as purged by Osiris 6,000 years before. At the destruction of Lemuria, Ra-Mu, the king and high priest of the Motherland, addressed the pleading crowd, saying, "You shall all die together, you and your servants and their riches. From your ashes new nations shall arise, and if they forget that they are superior, not because of what they put on, because of what they put out, the same will befall them." The foregoing indicates that the people had strayed from the teachings of the Lemurian church, become materialistic and forgotten spirit. Not that they had been led astray by the priests. It would appear that they were dropping the spiritual for the material. They were amassing riches and forgetting spirit. This would seem to be corroborated in a previous statement where Ra-Mu is quoted as saying, "Did I not predict all of this?" It was the priesthood of Egypt that caused the cataclysmic wave of false gods, idolatry, and spiritual degradation to sweep over the land. So well did they affect their nefarious designs that priestly orders throughout the world were drawn into the vortex, contributing to religion's spiritual downfall. This started over 5,000 years ago, and the prostituted Osirian religion has now long passed into the discard. Many of its extravagances have, however, persisted down to present times, and are found embodied in our religious conceptions. The Egyptians were the first to teach the worship of symbols, a thing strictly forbidden in the ancient religion. Thus began idolatry. The next step was the invention of a devil whom they called Set. For this malevolent being they imagined a domain which they called Hell. The extravagances of their description of this domain had no bounds, and one wonders how any sane person could have accepted them. According to these teachings, it was a place of everlasting flames, of burning brimstone that never died. Cast into these sulphurous flames, the soul remains scorching for all eternity. The soul of a man is a spirit. No element can touch or come into contact with a spirit. Sulfur is an element. Therefore, it cannot come into contact with a spirit, for a spirit is negative to all elementary matter. Even if it were not, the forces of the spirit are so much higher than those of the heat that the spirit could repel it. I shall next show how the devil himself managed to put in an appearance. The claim was made that the devil was an archangel, fallen from the waves of grace, and cast from heaven into hell. The 4 archangels are only another vestment for the 4 great primary forces, or as Max Muller calls it, a new disguise. As the great primary forces still exist, working and controlling the universe as old, it is clear that none have fallen, as the story of Lucifer would have us believe. It was thus that the Egyptian priesthood dragged the beautiful, pure Osirian religion into the mud, the religion with what Egypt commenced her history 10,000 years before, causing the nation itself to fall and become a slave of foreign conquerors. Before the Egyptian invention, a devil was unknown. Man had been taught that there were 2 influences attending him here on earth, a material influence emanating from his earthly body and a spiritual influence that came from his soul. His spiritual influence had the power to overcome the material, and it was his destiny that it should eventually dominate. It might, however, take many incarnations before this was accomplished, after which his soul would return to the great source. Hindu priests, always quick to adopt anything of material advantage to themselves, followed the Egyptian in their debauchery of religion. An obstacle that first had to be overcome, however, was their Nakal teachers. These were unwavering in their adherence to the teachings of the first religion, so the Brahmanical priests started to persecute the Nakals, eventually driving them into the snow-capped mountains of the north. When these holy men were disposed of, the debauchery commenced. Not wishing to borrow their devil from the Egyptians, the Brahmin priests invented one of their own, and called him Shiva, pronounced Shiva. From the time Shiva was grafted into the Hindu religion, history shows that the Hindus fell from the high pinnacle of civilization which had been theirs throughout the period of the Motherland. A little history will verify this assertion. Universal History and M.D. Voltaire, A.D. 1758, Volume 3, page 13, says, "The school of the ancient Gynosophis was still subsisting in the great city of Benares on the banks of the Ganges. There the Brahmins cultivated the sacred language which they called Hanferit, and looked upon it as the most ancient of all languages. The Nakal writings are in what is here called Hanferit. They admit of genii, like the primitive Persians. They tell their disciples that symbols are made only to fix the attention of the people and are different emblems of the deity. But as this sound theology would turn to no profit, they concealed it from the people, and taught what produced superstitious awe and fear. But that as it may be, the Indians were no longer a people of superior knowledge into whose country the ancient Greeks used to travel for instruction. India was the cradle of Greek philosophy. Up to 500 BC, the Greeks were going to India for learning. When they commenced going, I do not know, possibly 1,000 years before. W. Robertson, in A Historical Disposition of India, published 1794, page 274, said, "The Brahmins, it is well known, borrowed religion, as well as all other sciences of civilization, from the highly civilized Nagas, whom afterwards they relentlessly persecuted. One of the inventions of the Hindu priests was that man was first created as a grass, then a fish, passed into an amphibian, then a reptile, from a reptile into a mammal, and from this became a man. They also maintained that everything is a part of God and that all things together are God. And yet the same priesthood says that idolatry is a sin. Let us analyze this. Idolatry is a sin. The worship of idols made of wood and stone is idolatry. The worship of God is not idolatry. As the wood and stone are parts of God, the worship of wood and stone would be parts of God. Therefore, there is no such thing as idolatry, since whatever is worshipped is a part of God. What can be more fantastic than this? Yet I find the same conception in one of our religious sects today, and they call themselves Christians. Did Jesus ever utter such inconceivable nonsense?